Thank you very much, Gandhi, for inviting me and for all of you for attending and for the very nice introduction. I teach negotiations to undergrads, to full-time MBAs, executive MBAs, executive education, doctoral student. Anything left? I was a lawyer, but I did get my doctorate at the University of Maryland in conflict management and negotiation. So I love this topic. We only have an hour today, so let me get right into it. What we're going to do today is to briefly talk about the duality of people as it applies to negotiation. You'll see that humans uniquely are very social and very selfish. And those two motivations interact and affect how all of us approach and should approach negotiations. We would briefly talk about what is a good negotiator, what is a bad negotiator. We tend to have very strong stereotypes of what these things are, and sometimes they don't conform to reality. We'll talk briefly about perspective taking and the self-centered bias. Humans tend to be very selfish or self-centered in how we view all sorts of negotiations and conflict disputes. And that affects what's in our best interest. Sometimes because we're self-centered, we don't act in our best interest. Talk briefly about the importance of the environment when you negotiate. I'm sorry for this. I actually didn't intend to be hunkered down on this, but I am. How to engage in active listening. Briefly, we'll talk about the difference of distributive negotiations, which are win-lose negotiations, versus win-win. Let me ask you a question. Tell me one word that comes in your mind when you think of negotiations. Agreement. And raise your hand when you do this. Sorry?
Agreement.
I'm sorry?
Agreement.
Agreement. Bargaining. Yes. Compromise. Others. A deal. Yes. Contract. Okay. Very briefly, in those few words, we have very different perspectives on what negotiation is. To some people, it's a deal. Some people, it's bargaining. Some people, it's compromise. When I ask this in class, I get comments like listening, win-win, winning. Very different perspectives. Those perspectives we consciously or unconsciously bring into the whole negotiation perspective. So only doing this because it's plucked from the headlines. Donald Trump has a particular frame on negotiation. He might say winning or power. He uses a lot of power in negotiations. And that is different if you view negotiations about win-win or mutual winning. So these unconscious attitudes can affect how we pursue negotiation. What do we mean by negotiation? Well, when I teach the class, it's a joint agreement between two or more parties that gives each party something they cannot get without the other party. If I gave you a quiz, and this is not one of the quiz questions, I think, but if I gave you a quiz, you would all get this right. But I have a whole negotiation, a whole class, and my classes are 2.5 hours, exploring this. And most people in class will remember the words, but not the meaning behind the words. The difference being, sometimes we tend to negotiate to get an agreement just because we think an agreement is better than no agreement. People tend to forget that they have to look at their alternatives when they negotiate. And there are lots of different alternatives. You can accept whatever terms are offered by the other side. You can walk away from any agreement. And look what's going on. Again, if you read the headlines, I only do this because it tends to be current with people. President Trump and President of Mexico over who's going to pay for the wall. Well, maybe we'll have an agreement, maybe we won't. Maybe Mexico will accept whatever terms are offered by the United States. Maybe, which is where we are this morning, they'll walk away from any agreement. Maybe they'll have a third party decide what the agreement will do, or use some sort of coercion. I've already heard from Mexico newspapers today that the president of Mexico is threatening or saying that China looks like a pretty good negotiation alternative to the United States. That's a form of coercion. But all these things are alternatives to negotiation. In negotiations, there's basically two different approaches. One is called distributive negotiation. And whenever you hear a fancy term for something common sense, it means that another PhD was created. So distributive negotiation is nothing more than old-fashioned win-lose negotiation, which is also known by another name. Anybody know the other name for win-lose distributive? Here, we'll play hangman. You all know how to play hangman? Okay, give me a letter. Who said A? A. That's right. Give me another one. You know how to play this. Vowels first. Another letter. L? Very good. C? C? B? D. D. When you talk, can you raise your hand? I'm not sure. To me, it's a disembodied voice. You said D?
T for teacher.
C, T for teacher. Yeah. T. No, that's wrong. Something else? Yes. I. That's a good one. Okay, now you're getting enough clues. O? Oh, no. Yes.
N.
N, yes. Come on, you got enough now.
G.
G? E? Who's? It's a hand. I can't tell who's talking.
Is it gambling?
Gambling. No, that's totally wrong. Gambling, no. Yeah, those two major forms of negotiation, win-win and gambling. That makes sense. Come on, give me another guess. What do you think this letter is?
G.
G, right. Okay, we got angling. Angling. Oh, wait a minute. You got G. Oh, it's better than that. GG.
Haggling.
Yeah, haggling. Haggling is exactly the same thing as distributive negotiation, but because some academic created the term distributive negotiation, that got them their PhD. Exactly the same. The other form of negotiation is actually more complicated and newer. Haggling has obviously been around for, as far as we can tell, at least 50,000 years. Integrative is also known as collaborative. Some of you have heard it as win-win negotiation. You've always wondered probably what win-win is. So I'm going to show you. Haggling, or distributive negotiation, let's assume we have a fixed pie of resources. Distributive negotiation is about value claiming. Whoever claims the largest portion of the pie is the winner in negotiation. So this person is the winner, and although not politically correct, you call something what it is, this person's the loser. But when you negotiate integratively, and we don't have time to go into how to do that, conceptually, that involves value creation. And you're trying to expand the pie so that both parties are better off. Those are the two types of major negotiations: distributive or integrative. What's a good versus bad negotiator? Bad negotiator is too accommodating or too stubborn. Sometimes I get people who think that they are good negotiators because they won't move in negotiation. And in fact, when I started off as an attorney, I decided I was going to develop a reputation for toughness as a negotiator. And I would make an offer, and that was it. Take it or leave it. Lo and behold, most people left it. And I had clients not so happy with me because deals were not done. So a bad negotiator is somebody who's too accommodating or too stubborn. Somebody who lets their emotions interfere with reasoning. The problem with letting your emotions control negotiations is then you want to satisfy your emotions. If you're angry, you're not going to be happy until anger is satisfied. And when you do that, you often lose sense of what's best in the deal. Now, I've known negotiations where people fake emotions. That's different, because then they're not really emotional and they are control of where the negotiation should go. But don't let your emotions interfere with reasoning. Failing to prepare. If you're going to take one thing out of this class to become a better negotiator, it's prepare. I know a lot of people think they're good negotiators because literally I've had people say they don't need to prepare. They just think their magnetic personality will win the day. But the single most important thing you can do is prepare for a negotiation. That allows you to respond to anything expected or unexpected. Failing to listen or to ask questions is something a bad negotiator does. Not being creative is bad, and not concerned with how the other party feels. A good negotiator does the opposite of each of these. Now, you should have all received Negotiation Conflict Styles Inventory, one page, double-sided. I'd like you to take about a few minutes now and fill it in as quickly as you can, as best as you can, and we won't have time to go over individual results, but we'll talk about the results collectively. Okay, now let's talk about it. Now, how many people finished? Can I see your hands higher, please? Okay, most of you, good. The purpose of this is to understand how you approach negotiation and conflict situations. We have a lot of good research in negotiation. It probably has to do with the dependent variable being outcomes or money a lot. The research is very useful. The problem is people differentially use the various knowledge and tools we have from research because all of this knowledge is filtered through your own personality. If you are highly competitive, unusually highly competitive, for example, even though the knowledge may say in a certain situation you should engage in a cooperative negotiation, it's hard to overcome your inborn tendencies to be a competitor. Conversely, if you tend to avoid conflict, and a situation may dictate, according to the research, that you be highly competitive, you're fighting against your nature and it's difficult. So what we have here, based on research, is 5 different styles. Let's see if I have, whoops. There are 5 different styles research tells us in conflict and negotiation situations. There is, it's all based on whether you care a lot about concern for others, or you care more about concern for yourself. If you remember, I said earlier that a big dilemma among humans is whether how we balance our obligations to others and our concern with our own self-interest. So if somebody has a high concern for others, and a low concern for themselves, low, high, low, high. Let's divide it up into a grid. Can you read this at all? No? Okay, I'll talk it out. So let's suppose you have a low concern for others and a high concern for yourself, low concern for others and a high concern for yourself. That would make you a competitor. Make sense? If you have a high concern for others and a low concern for yourself, that would make you an accommodator. You might think of an accommodator. Sometimes people think of them not nicely as a doormat. People just do whatever they want. If you have a low concern for others and a low concern for yourself, that would be an avoider. If you have a high concern for others and a high concern for yourself, this would be a cooperator. Make sense? And if you're sort of in the middle in all these, that would be a compromiser. Okay, what do you think research tells us is the single best approach that managers can take in the workplace to be an effective manager? Sorry? Cooperator? How many say cooperator? How many say competitor? How many say compromiser? How many say avoider? How many say accommodator? How many people are asleep? You got to help me out, people. I got like 3 people that says cooperator. I'm going to ask it again. Do you think you know the styles? Do I need to go over them again? If you have a low concern for others and a high concern for yourself, that's a competitor. If you have a high concern for both yourself and others, that's a cooperator. If you have a low concern for yourself and others, that's an avoider. And if you have a higher concern for others than yourself, that's an accommodator. The middle is a compromiser. I'm going to ask again, what do you think research tells us is the most successful quality in terms of approaching negotiation and conflict that a manager can have? Let me ask them this way. How many say competitor? How many say cooperator? How many say accommodator? How many say avoider? Okay. What do you think managers say? Compromiser? Managers are sort of split between cooperators, competitors. This is the highest, this is next, and this is next. Now, they've done film studies, and they actually know what managers do. They've secretly filmed real managers. What do you think is the single most dominant style that managers actually do? A hand. Competitor. People say competitor. Avoider. And if you ask managers to rank the most preferable style from top to bottom, avoider is the least preferable. My point is, each of these styles have advantages and disadvantages. And there is no one style that is best all the time. If I'd asked this question in the 60s, if anyone's seen the TV show Mad Men, what do you think the most prevalent answer would have been then? Competitor. These things are trendy. Nowadays, it's very trendy to cooperate. But they all have advantages and disadvantages. So, avoider is good. How could it possibly be that effective managers use that more often? What could be the advantage to avoiding a particular situation? Can you think of any? Yes? Okay, what's the short-term solution to avoiding? What about time? Yes?
You don't have to confront.
You don't have to think about it. Yeah. The advantage to avoiding, and managers do this almost unconsciously, they don't think of it as a technique, is you're prioritizing. What they're saying, the rarest commodity for managers is time. So by saying, I'm not going to deal with this, presumably they don't do this for important issues, they do this for the least, what they think are the least important issues. And it's functional because they deal with the most important. So the most effective managers know what to deal with first, what to deal with last. So avoidance can be good. Accommodation, which I call doormat, just to make fun. Can anybody think of what's good about an accommodator? How many people think they accommodate a lot in their life? No, we don't like accommodation, right? That's bad. We like to do things, to be in charge. How many people are in serious relationships or married? You think you accommodate? All the time. Called yes, dears. How many people accommodate with their parents? Their parents bug them and they don't feel like hassling. They say, okay, mom, or usually mom, or dad. Why do we do that? Because it's functional, because we care more about the relationship than we do about the outcome, per se. So that's functional too. Compromise. Now, compromise is misunderstood, and we don't have time to go into it in fully detail. Most people think compromise is good because it gives everybody some of what they want. Usually it turns out to be suboptimal because it assumes when we have multiple issues that everyone values the issues the same. But if we would learn about win-win negotiation, we would learn that that's typically not the case. Some people care more about some issues than others, and in order to do a win-win negotiation, we try and figure out which issues people care about most about and give them that. Compromise is often suboptimal because it assumes people value multiple issues similarly. But it's good to get kind of a quick resolution. It's good in time, but it has a disadvantage too. Competition is good if you have a strong interest in the outcome and the relationship is not very important. Again, Donald Trump seems to be a competitor, which is good if you're not going to need Mexico for anything in the future. But there's a cost in being a competitor. It also can be difficult if the other side is highly competitive. And don't make the mistake of just because a negotiation is competitive, that it's the same as being aggressive or hostile. When I negotiate it's rarely in your interest to be aggressive or hostile. When I negotiate competitively, I am the most gentle thing in the world. Because your goal should be aggressive, but if you're too aggressive, you give people a reason to not want to deal with you. I mean, you're already giving them a low outcome, and then you say, take it or leave it. Then you're giving people two reasons to walk away. One, the deal is bad, and two, they don't like you. So actually, when I negotiate competitively, when I make a lowball offer, I apologize. I say, I'm so sorry, I can't give you more. It's worth way more than what I'm offering. And if I were you, I would turn down my offer. You'd be amazed. I literally say that. You'd be amazed how often that's successful. But you have to separate the idea of it's a competitive negotiation from being aggressive or hostile in tone. Finally, collaboration. I'm all for collaboration when the negotiation makes sense. But collaborative negotiations take a lot of time. And you have to have a strong interest in the relationship and the outcome. So let's suppose I'm negotiating, I'm going down to Nogales, Mexico for the day, and I see a merchant and he has a set of dishes I like. And They're not that expensive. Let's suppose he's asking 30 bucks. And should I sit there and try and figure out how to make this a win-win negotiation? No, not really, if I want to do other things there, because time is a commodity. Win-win takes a lot of time. So I'm all for collaboration, win-win negotiation, but you shouldn't pursue everything this way. So let me hear, what I'm interested in is people with really big spreads in their high score and their low score. Who has a spread from whatever it is of more than 20? Yes?
Collaborator 34, avoider 8.
Avoider was your highest?
Lowest,
And how much was that?
8.
8. And what was your highest?
Collaborator
And what was that?
34.
34 to 8. That's 26 difference. That's pretty high. What that means is, let's get a couple more. Who has anything more than 26? Yeah,
Collaborator 27.
27. And what's the lowest?
14.
Sorry?
Avoider 14.
14. Well, that's not as big a spread, but it's a spread. I'm looking for the spread.
Oh, the spread.
This gentleman's spread was 26, correct? From the highest to the lowest. Who has a spread in the back there?
Collaborator 33, avoider 2.
Collaborator 17,
Collaborator 33,
33.
32,
33.
33, and what was lowest?
avoider
2. That's pretty big. 31, you might be close to a new record. So that was collaborator and avoider, right? So you don't like to avoid, right? Right, it's bad. Do you sometimes find yourself short on time? Might be related. And you've also picked as your most dominant style a time-intensive thing. Collaboration takes more time than anything. Anyone have a spread bigger than 31? Oh, okay, yeah.
Collaborator 37 and avoider 5.
37 for collaborator. And what was the lowest?
Avoider.
Avoider, similar. So that's 32. Same thing. Do you often find yourself short on time? Huh?
Probably.
Probably, okay. Just those few, and we probably have people, who's highest on competitor? No, yes. What was your score?
27.
27. And your lowest?
Avoider 6.
People don't like avoider. Okay. The point is, who had a really narrow spread? Anybody have a spread of less than 8? From the highest to the lowest. Yes, what was your spread?
My accommodator was 24 and my compromiser was 20.
20? Yeah. Okay, so that's only 4. If you had a really big spread, 26, what that means is you have a really strong dominant style in whatever that is. In this case, it was collaboration. That means you probably tend to view most conflicts and negotiation as a collaborative engagement. But as we see, collaboration is not always good. And if you had a really low, whatever your lowest score is, you probably underutilize that. So your dominant style, you probably overutilize. Your lowest style, you probably underutilize. Conversely, the people who had a really narrow spread, it's easier for them to adapt their style to whatever the situation dictates, following this matrix here, when it's good to use each style. So if you have a really big spread, think twice before you automatically see every dispute as whatever your dominant style is. And think twice about using your lower styles. We're going to have to move on. So try and pick the approach that best aligns with your goal. Yeah?
What is the optimum spread then?
I'm sorry?
What is the optimum spread between the extremes?
The optimum? Well, there's no optimum per se, but I think it's easier for negotiators to have a very narrow spread, because then they don't have real dominant styles that are fighting against. These styles are usually formed literally by the time you're 5 years old. If you were raised in a household where you would hear at dinner, you know, competition is great, the world is tough, be a competitor all the time, you probably adapted that as your values. If you were in a family that said, you know, peace, love everyone, treat everyone the same, then you're a cooperator. If you were in a family that said, conflict's bad, causes stress, ulcers, you're a avoider. So these attitudes become incorporated in how we view life. So I find that it tends to be easier for people to pick the best style if their spreads are pretty narrow. Make sense? Okay. Stop filming here, please.